let's move on to just let's touch briefly on the first section, I guess. So the first section is talks about the difficulties in designing just energy transition. Right off the bat, there's my writing and my friend. We were talking about the adoption of solar roof panel, and I would say we argue in the article that the adoption of solar roof panel are still facing many hurdles. One of which is um, the national electricity, uh, the national electricity enterprise are not allowing people to adopt that because one of the reasons is the thing that you mentioned. In big cities, we are having an oversupply of electricity from fossil fuels, and if I can electrify my house using this solar panel rooftop, then I will not, have this or consume this oversupply electricity to my house, right? And we have a problem of oversupply, right? I mean, that's one dimension that I just realized from what you just said. Another thing is the transportation. You've been talk about it as well. There's also human rights issue. There's also downstreaming of the nickel, and so on and so forth. So I think I'm gonna leave all of us with that for the first section, and let's move on to the second section. Is the negative excesses of energy transition. Now, when we talk about energy transition, we have several options, right? For instance, we want to have nickel downstreaming for batteries, for instance, for electric vehicle batteries, right? But it has, it has something that we need to look for. For instance, the risk of nickel downstreaming. The other thing is geothermal energy. There's also another downside of it. And then um, hydropower, right? There's also another downside for it, right? So would you, just summarize a little bit what these things?
Yeah, so the energy transition. So the second part of this book is the excesses of the energy transition, and there are three articles, three papers. They're written like from various standpoints. One is from journalist Adi Anugrah Pratama. I think he's a journalist. Uh, if not a journalist, I think he's a lawyer. I think he's a lawyer. And another is from a researcher in BRIN or National Research National Research Council, I think. And Ahmad Hidayat is from a consultant from a carbon consultant in Indonesia, and also uh, he's a lecturer in the international relations department. Basically, they're all talking about the same things. And when we're talking about the energy transition, we will need like a new renewable energy source, and that energy source exploration will necessitate some external consequences, and these external consequences can be bad for the community. When we're talking about nickel, for instance, uh, I need to be honest with all of us. Basically, when we're talking about nickel or nickel product here, it's not being used as a solar panel or battery yet. I mean, there's the plan of the government to like making more complete supply chain of nickels from the mining to the like battery producing part of the supply chain, but we're not at that point yet. But basically, well, our nickel is being used mostly as stainless steel in China, be exported to China, and uh, but the high price of nickel nowadays is driven by the electric vehicle boom, and this high price is also fueling like the exploration everywhere, and this exploration creates problems for communities who is living in adjacent to where the mining will be done. Like in some parts of the Sulawesi, some smaller islands of Sulawesi, they're right now having a crisis of water, clean water source. Basically, their water source is now being polluted everywhere in every parts where there's a nickel like industry there. The water source will be very much polluted, and people need to like they need to to buy they need to buy the water, the resource that they can use like or access freely. They can use it is now contaminated. It's when we're talking about nickel, that's the problem right now. It's giving a problem to the community who is living there into the resources. And this the same thing is happening as well when we're talking about geothermal and also the hydropower. The hydropower, for instance, it needs to like when we're talking about the hydropower, they will need to like making a big dam, bendungan besar. They need to establish like a big dam, and for that purpose, usually they will need to drown some villages in the area.
When you want to have hydropower, you need big dam, and you have to drown some villages in the area. Oh, okay.
So that's basically when we're talking about big dam and hydropower project. This is a project that has already like having a bad reputation in the world since the 1970s, because of during the 1970s, during the 1950s and 1960s, World Bank start giving like loans to developing countries, and those loans are being used to like developing energy sources. And in many parts of the world, the energy sources were hydropower, and hydropower in many parts are drowning villages. And during those times, there's still only a very few indigenous movement and transnational indigenous movement that has influence for the global politics. So basically people are trying to fight on the community level only, not there's no lobbying group from the indigenous people yet. And in the 1970s, what's happening in the Philippines, for instance, there's a big in an area there was to be about to be developed as a high area for the hydroelectric power plant. It turns into a war zone because the community did not want for their villages, their forests, and the areas where they were born there. They find they found their livelihood there. They do not want it to be drowned. And of course the government at uh they they want to turn it into a big dam, and consequently it turned into a war zone, which eventually like attracted international attention. And nowadays that very project became like one of the 10 most notorious World Bank loaning project that they have ever gave. So basically, the problem now when we're talking about the energy transition, this energy transition is creating a new source of funding, basically a new kind of funding that can be accessed. Many of them can be accessed by Indonesia because it supports the transition of energy to usually geothermal or hydro energy or solar panel. This kind of loan can be accessed by the government, and also by the probably in the near future there will be funding from the carbon market as well, from company who want to like sold their want to want to buy carbon credit. And are right when these monies are funding this kind of projects, the hydroelectric projects, it will be having a really negative consequences for the communities. So that's why in the COP 29, the latest COP that we have, the people, the delegates from many, usually the in some delegates, usually not the country's delegates, usually from the indigenous people and communities and NGOs are trying to push like the do you have like a community safeguard guidelines. So basically the problem with the transition energy accesses are something that's basically this is something that will impact communities life everywhere, and we do not have like a guideline to like uh how do we manage and mitigate all of the negative consequences that may happen to communities and has already happened to some communities. And we can and these writings are like trying to they're like trying to bring up some of those negative consequences and like giving examples to people. And I think this part is a really good read.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. The next part is hijacking energy transition. Um, some of the authors talks about the nexus between capital and the elites, for instance, or strategic alliance. They also talked about, again, the downsides of green capitalism. There's also greenwashing, right? But I'm really sorry, due to the interest of time, I'm going to skip this part. But I would say this is a very interesting part. Some of the writers here are well known writers, actually, here. And then we move on to the fourth section. And this is where, and I think this is where we should find a shred of optimism, right? Because it talks about the role of civil society in energy transition, right? There are many topics here, so please talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about hope and you're opening up this talk with that with the question whether there's still hope or not, uh we're talking about something that the people, our friends in the civil society organizations are trying to find. I mean, they're trying to like is their struggle nowadays. They're trying to like find hope, whether or not they're what they're trying to do right now will have impact. And when we're talking about how civil societies are doing all of these things right now, I mean, considering the big interest that we have today and how they're used to like they're just developing parts. Suddenly we have this kind of policies. Suddenly we have that kind of policies that do not that are being passed without consulting the publics. I think the civil societies right now are in a situation where they're they want to like hoping they want to have like a hope, but they're also like I don't know whether you can say that they're on the verge of despair or not. I mean, that's a heavy word, of course. And in this fourth section, the fourth segment of the book, we're talking about the civil societies and what they are doing basically. What they are doing? They've briefed Margiansyah, the first paper in this segment, basically trying to lay it out what they are doing all this time and trying to categorize using like he has already he cited he cited some theories developed of course not in Indonesia, in I think southern parts of the world as well, regarding when he's trying when this theory is trying to like account for the energy transition elsewhere, and he's trying to like laying out in Indonesia whether or not what's the civil societies are doing these days, what kind of struggles that they have, what kind of approaches that they take is it's in the writing of the first paper. And we also have like another paper that's trying to as well like to bring up the social movement here in Indonesia in regard to the transition. When we're talking, the first one is focused on the NGOs, and the second one's trying to like uh identifying what kind of social movement that arises uh, in regard to the electric vehicles in regard to the in relation to the electric vehicle issues in Indonesia. And the third one is, I think, it's a suggestion. Basically, the third one. I mean, there's so many writings and there's so many style of writings. Some are trying to like making an identification, making like a research, making a mapping, and others are making suggestions. The third one is trying to make a suggestion for the civil societies, what kind of strategies that they need to undertake to like doing a good communication to the public. And the last one is a suggestion, and also is this last this last article, this is the last article in this paper. We're lacking of like a concluding remark. Basically, we need a concluding remark, but probably it can be done in the second second volume of this book. The last article here talking about the journalists, how journalists can have their uh role in overseeing and also helping people knowing what's happening right now in regard to energy transition. And journalists have a really big, of course journalists have a really big role here. And this is something that I think nowadays are NGOs trying to address. I mean, NGOs trying to like giving grants for journalists to doing coverage for energy transitions issues. I think they're really great, and I think this is something that is not being covered in the in the book or in the articles inside the book. But I think we also need to like address the fact that right now media is not very effective in reaching the people and reaching the audience, because we're talking about the era of social media where people are using their social media to get their information. So I think that's also another point, probably something that it can inspire people to like idea for writing about the transition. Probably if they're from the communication discipline, they can try to like do some exploration about how social media can relate to this issue, how the algorithm can be like adjusted to uh to bring this issue to more to the mainstream part of our audience. And this is the thing that our NGOs are currently trying to do. They're trying to make like TikTok page, they're trying to make Instagram page, they're trying to make like doing a social media engagement in order to like get public to be invested in these issues. So basically, two of the less articles in this book trying to give like suggestion about the communication paradigm that they need to have and undertake in order to communicate these issues effectively to the public.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask everyone to give round of applause for our first section. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Geger.